For 30 years, Johnny Carson had been America's companion through the night. Now, on May 22, 1992, it was time to say goodbye. The final show had been perfect. The laughs, the tears, the standing ovation from 50 million viewers. But after the cameras cut and the studio emptied, Johnny and his last guest, Bette Midler, stood alone on that iconic stage. What he told her in those quiet moments wasn't about comedy or fame or television history. It was about something far more human and far more heartbreaking. 25 years later, when Bette finally shared Johnny's words, the world understood why she'd waited so long. Some secrets are too heavy to carry alone. It was May 22, 1992 at NBC's Studio One in Burbank, California. Johnny Carson was about to close the book on the most successful run in television history. 30 years, 4,531 episodes, countless moments that defined American culture. The energy in the studio that night was electric but melancholic. Everyone knew they were witnessing the end of an era. Crew members who had worked with Johnny for decades were openly crying. The audience of 200 carefully selected people sat in reverent silence trying to memorize every second. Johnny had planned everything meticulously. No guest interviews, just clips, memories, and a few musical performances. He wanted to go out his way. Simple, classy, on his own terms. But there was one exception. One person Johnny insisted must be there. Bette Midler. Bette had been Johnny's favorite guest over the years. She'd appeared on The Tonight Show dozens of times, always bringing energy, humor, and a voice that could fill any room. But more than that, there was a mutual respect between them, a rare friendship in the cutthroat world of show business. For the final show, Johnny asked Bette to sing 2 songs that would close out 3 decades of late-night television. One for my baby and one more for the road. And You Made Me Love You. As Bette began singing, One for My Baby, something magical happened. The melancholic ballad about last call at a bar felt like it was written for this exact moment. Johnny sat at his desk watching Bette perform. And for the first time in 30 years, he wasn't playing the role of Johnny Carson, host and entertainer. He was just Johnny, a man saying goodbye to a life that had defined him completely. Bette's voice cracked with emotion. Tears streamed down her face, but she never stopped. The cameras captured it all. Johnny wiping his eyes, crew members sobbing behind cameras, the audience sitting in stunned silence. When Bette finished You Made Me Love You, she walked to Johnny's desk, they embraced, a long genuine hug between 2 friends, closing a chapter neither was ready to close. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. After Bette's performance, Johnny delivered his final monologue. Brief, humble, quintessentially Carson. I am one of the lucky people in the world, Johnny said, his voice steady but emotional. I found something I always wanted to do, and I have enjoyed every single minute of it. He paused, looking directly into the camera. I bid you a very heartfelt good night. The theme music played, the cameras pulled back. The credits rolled. After 30 years, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson was over. The audience applauded for what felt like an eternity. Johnny waved, smiled that iconic smile one last time, and walked off stage. But the cameras didn't capture what happened next. Once the studio lights dimmed, something unusual happened. The audience filed out slowly, many crying, not wanting to leave. The crew moved like they were in slow motion, as if dismantling the set would make the end too real. Johnny stood backstage, still in his suit, still looking like the Johnny Carson America knew. But his posture had changed. The weight of being perfect and on for 30 years seemed to hit him all at once. Doc Severinsen approached, shaking hands silently. Ed McMahon, who'd announced, "Here's Johnny," for 3 decades, embraced him like a brother. "We did it, John," Ed whispered. "Yeah, we did," Johnny replied. But there was one more person Johnny needed to see before leaving Studio One forever. Bette. Midler was in her dressing room, still in the elegant black dress from her performance. Her makeup was stray. She stared at herself in the mirror, trying to process what had just happened. A soft knock on the door. "Come in," Bette called out. Johnny Carson stepped inside. Bette looked at Johnny carefully. She'd never seen him this vulnerable. "Johnny," she said quietly, Can I ask you something? Why now? Why did you really walk away? It was the question everyone in America wanted answered. Johnny was at the top of his game. Ratings were phenomenal. He could have continued for years. Johnny was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Bette, I'm 66 years old. I've spent 30 years going to bed at 2 a.m. waking up thinking about the next show. I've interviewed presidents, movie stars, people whose names I can't even remember. I've made people laugh through divorces, wars, assassinations. But you want to know the truth. He paused, tears in his eyes. I can't remember the last time I wasn't performing. Even at home, even alone, I'm still playing the part of Johnny Carson. And I'm tired, Bette. I'm so tired of being him. Got a minute? He asked softly. Johnny, of course, always. They sat on the small couch. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of the evening hung between them. Thank you, Johnny finally said, for being here tonight. For the songs, for everything. Bette squeezed his hand. Are you okay? Johnny smiled, but it wasn't the practiced camera smile. It was real, tinged with sadness. You know what's funny? I've been preparing for this moment for years. I knew exactly when I wanted to leave, how I wanted to do it. But now that it's here, I don't know what to do with myself. Bette felt her heart break. The man beside her wasn't the confident host who commanded a stage. He was just a man who'd given everything and didn't know who he was without it. What are you going to do? She asked gently. Johnny looked at her and smiled genuinely for the first time that night. I don't know, and that terrifies me and excites me. Maybe I'll sail. Maybe I'll play tennis. Maybe I'll just sit on my deck and watch the ocean and not have to be funny or clever for anyone. He walked to the window looking at the parking lot where crews were loading equipment. You know what the hardest part is? Everyone thinks I'm walking away from something, but the truth is I'm walking towards something I've never had. The chance to just be John. Not Johnny Carson. Just John. Bette walked over and put her hand on his shoulder. Then that's what you do. You earned it, Johnny. You gave America 30 years. Now you get to give yourself the rest. Johnny turned to face her, eyes red but smiling. Can I ask you for a favor? Anything. What I just told you about being tired, about not knowing who I am without the show, I don't want anyone to know that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The world sees Johnny Carson as confident, successful. Maybe that's how it should stay. Bette understood. He was giving her a piece of his real self and asking her to keep it safe. I won't tell anyone, Bette said. Not while you're alive. But Johnny, someday people should know. They should know that even the strongest people get tired because that truth helps people. Johnny nodded slowly. Someday, but not now. Not now, Bette agreed. They hugged again longer this time. I should go, Johnny said, voice stronger now. Alexis is waiting. They walked to the stage door together. The studio was nearly empty. A few crew members kept a respectful distance. Johnny paused at the door and turned to Bette one last time. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for keeping my secret. It's not a secret, Johnny. Bette replied. It's just the truth, and I'll hold on to it until the world is ready. Johnny kissed her cheek, then pushed open the door and walked into the California night. Bette stood watching him go. She just witnessed something important. Not the end of a television show, but the beginning of a man's journey to find himself. Johnny Carson disappeared from public life after that night. No interviews, no appearances, no special occasions. He spent his time sailing, playing tennis, and sitting on his Malibu deck. He learned how to be John again. Bette kept her promise. She never told anyone about their conversation. The world speculated endlessly about why Johnny had really left, but only Bette knew the truth. Johnny lived 13 years in retirement, finding peace he'd never known during his television career. In 2005, Johnny died at age 79. Weeks later, Bette received a letter dated a month before his death with instructions to deliver it only after he was gone. It was handwritten and short. Dear B, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Thank you for keeping my secret all these years. You were right. People should know the truth. Not to diminish what we accomplished, but to show it's okay to be tired, to be uncertain, to want something different. I found him, by the way, John. It took a few years, but I figured out who I was without the cameras. He's not as funny as Johnny Carson, but he's more at peace, and that's enough. Feel free to tell our story now. Maybe it will help someone else who's lost themselves in their work. Thank you for being my friend when I needed one most. Bette kept the letter private for 12 more years. In 2017, during an interview for her memoir, she finally told the story of that dressing room conversation on May 22, 1992. She shared everything. Johnny's confession, his exhaustion, his fear, and his journey to find John again. The interview went viral immediately. But people weren't disappointed. They were moved. Social media exploded with messages from people who related to Johnny's struggle. Burned-out executives, retired athletes, performers who'd forgotten themselves. Johnny Carson was my hero, one person wrote. But knowing he struggled makes him even more heroic because he found the courage to walk away and find himself. The revelation changed how people viewed not just Johnny Carson, but success itself. It opened conversations about the cost of fame, the importance of identity outside work, and the courage it takes to walk away. David Letterman, who'd been mentored by Johnny, spoke about it later. Johnny taught us how to do a show, Letterman said. But in his final act, he taught us something more important. How to know when it's time to stop. That takes more courage than anything else. Johnny Carson's final whisper to Midler reminds us we are not our jobs. For 30 years, Johnny was defined by what he did. He was The Tonight Show. He was late-night television. He was the face America turned to every night. But he was also John, a man who liked sailing and tennis and quiet sunsets. A man who wanted to figure out who he was when the cameras weren't rolling. He walked away from the most successful television show in history to find himself. And in doing so, he taught us all it's never too late to choose peace over performance, authenticity over applause, and self-discovery over success. Bette waited 25 years to share Johnny's secret because she understood the world needed to see him as confident and successful while he was alive. That was his legacy, his gift to America. But after he was gone, after he'd found peace, the world needed to know the truth. Not to tear down his legacy, but to complete it. Johnny Carson's greatest achievement wasn't 30 years of television excellence. It was the courage to walk away and find out who he really was. And in the end, John found peace. That's worth more than any standing ovation, rating, or legacy. If this story of courage, vulnerability, and self-discovery moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to walk away, to change, to find yourself beyond your job title. Have you ever walked away from something successful to find yourself? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more untold stories about the human side of Hollywood's greatest legends.